The Trump administration is openly attempting to erase trans people, be it through an executive order declaring that there are only two genders, or preventing people from having non binary gender markers on their passports, or through the erasure of medical literature that contains certain keywords that they dislike. In my genuine question to conservatives and people who are actively doing this is, do you really think that you can erase trans people? Do you really think that trans people are just going to go away? Let me break it down for you. Say that you believe that there are only two genders, and by extension, you believe that there are only two sexes. What is your response to intersex people? Because they represent about 2% of the population, about the same as Native Americans in the US, and you cannot deny their existence because it is physical. There are people who are physically born with both sets of reproductive organs. There are people with conditions such as Swyer syndrome, where they are female presenting but they have XY chromosomes. There are people with Klinefelter syndrome, where they are male presenting but with an extra X chromosome, XXY. There are people with Turner syndrome where they have just one X chromosome. These people do not fit into the gender binary. If people exist outside of the gender binary, then the concept of a gender binary is flawed at best. If cisgender people express themselves on a spectrum, for instance, I shave my beard, some people don't shave their beard. Some people would consider that being more masculine or less masculine. Then the concept of a gender binary is flawed, and therefore we should look towards having an idea or model of a gender spectrum as opposed to a gender binary. Now, in order to prove whether or not people express themselves on a spectrum, consider what has been considered effeminate or masculine throughout history. Has it been consistent? Well, no, it hasn't. Wearing high heels is considered feminine now, but 300 years ago it was considered masculine. Wearing makeup or pink is considered feminine now. 300 years ago, it was not. And then the question then becomes, have people with gender dysphoria existed throughout history at all? Is this a recent development? And the answer is that yes, there is historical precedent for trans people. This is Christine Jorgensen. She transitioned in 1952. This is Public Universal Friend, a Quaker who identified as non-binary starting in 1776. There's even more cases of people identifying outside of the gender binary throughout all of history, one example being the Galli of ancient Rome. There is historical precedence for the existence of trans people throughout all of human history, even during times where identifying as such was incredibly dangerous, such as in the 1950s and 60s in the US. For that matter, there is also scientific and biological validation of trans people as well. So why act as if they don't exist? Why treat them as if it's a mental illness or an ideology when it's not? Now, if you're a conservative who believes in the right of liberty, then you must understand that that includes the right of other people to make decisions that you don't necessarily agree with. But if you also believe in the right to life, then you agree with gender affirming care, whether you realize it or not. Because the fact is that gender affirming care benefits more cisgender people than it benefits transgender people. For instance, when it comes to puberty blockers, there are more cisgender people on puberty blockers for precocious puberty than there are transgender minors on puberty blockers for gender dysphoria. Same thing could be argued for steroids that are taken by bodybuilders, as well as surgeries such as hair transplants or treatments for gynecomastia, which are done by more cisgender people than transgender people. Furthermore, there is enough scientific evidence to demonstrate that if trans people do not receive gender-affirming care for gender dysphoria, then it severely inhibits their ability to fully maximize their potential. Again, if there is scientific precedence for trans people, if there is historical precedence for trans people, if the treatment for gender dysphoria benefits more cisgender people than transgender people, then it is not right for us to deprive trans people of the care that they need in order to fully express themselves. It is also just incredibly ignorant to deny the existence of trans people at all, as they have always existed and they will exist despite what any executive order would say.